I'm focusing on vegetable oils for almost 20 years now. I started off working for a local NGO that was promoting indigenous non-timber forest products. And as part of my work, I had to come up with some products that we would encourage farmers to make from indigenous species as a way of conserving these indigenous species. So in a lot of the communities, they had the indigenous fruit trees. So we would look at products that we could derive from these indigenous fruit trees that would then encourage the farmers to make as a way of earning a living out of the forest. And so that's how my journey started. Amongst the products, we made jams, food products, powders, and some oils. So that's how I started working on the oils. And the oils included marula, baobab. And so those were the initial stages of development of these indigenous products. So over the years, I've developed these products further to look at markets beyond the Zimbabwean market. And then as we were looking for markets, there were a lot of questions that were being asked by the international customers that we had not, of aspects of, the product development that we had not gone into as the NGO and also as a producer who was selling locally, because these were products that were familiar in the local market. So in international markets, there were a lot more questions and a lot more requirements that we started to encounter. And my background is biochemistry. So it wasn't very difficult for me to start looking into the research and further development of these products and to address some of the questions that international markets were asking for. So this is, that's how then my journey began. And once we started with one oil, the customers were asking, what other oils can you offer? And then I would go back to the community to look at what other resources were available from which we could get oils, and then would investigate further to see what the oils would look like, what the properties would be like, and then started to introduce these into the markets. And so now we produce a range of 8 different oils, vegetable oils, all of which are mostly targeted at the cosmetic industry. Some of them have got potential for use as food, but we haven't really focused much on the food market, mainly because I think the food market requires a different kind of, certification that, we haven't invested in yet, because you have to have, produce according to food standards. And then I think food standards tend to be a step higher than what you would require for cosmetics. So that has been my journey. The one thing that the customers didn't want to do was to be engaging with local community people who were loosely formed. They were not a company. They did not have the expertise. And also they didn't have the know-how. So customers didn't want to deal with farmers. They wanted, a structured kind of organization, more commercial. So that's how I then began, the company. And I've continued to work with a lot of the farmers that I was working with when I was working for the NGO. And I've also developed, supply chains with new farmers over the years. Our focus is mostly on wild harvest. So all of the species that we work with are indigenous, and obviously why they occur in the wild. So we only work with products that are available in abundance. And once we've identified a product that has got potential, we look at distribution maps and also assess the status of the resource. If it's not threatened in the environment that it is in, or if it is not under pressure, especially from different users of the product. By different users, I'm not only talking about people, there's also the wildlife or even the domestic animals, if they are not also targeting the same species for browsing. And so once we've established, all of these things, and we've come up with a sort of balance as to how much of that particular resource we can access without putting pressure on the environment and on that particular resource, only then do we go into a particular area to start harvesting. And also we look at our harvesting to ensure that it's sustainable, and to ensure that there's continued supply. So in some areas where we've identified a particular resource and we've seen that there are no young trees of a particular species, we try to work with the community to encourage them to plant more trees, more younger generation trees, so that we can ensure there is going to be that particular species in future. So we only work with species that are in abundance, and for which they are not threatened, and for which we can be sure that our harvesting is not going to deplete that particular resource. The farmers are involved in harvesting, and to a certain extent they do pre-processing, and then they supply us with a semi-finished product, and then we do the final processing. So we are not involved in any of the cultivation. So for example, with the Kalahari melon that I mentioned, where we've started looking at cultivation, we work with the farmers, and then we give them training, and we also bring in any government bodies that can assist us with trainings. Here in Zimbabwe, we've got the Forestry Commission and the Environment Management Agency. Those are the government departments that are working with rural people. So we work through them, and they facilitate some of the trainings and assist us with setting up, the trainings for these farmer groups so that they can do the cultivation. And then we only buy the semi-processed raw material from them. We start with the raw material. We have developed some specifications or some standards that we give to the farmers when we train them in the pre-processing. So we don't work with farmers that we have not registered as our supplier, and we haven't provided various trainings for. So all of our farmers have been trained, and they know the quality of the raw material that we would like to purchase. So at the point of purchase, we inspect the seeds. And for any seeds that do not meet the quality specifications, we reject. And so we only accept seeds that have met our minimum quality specifications. And then once we bring them to our processing factory here in Harare, we then subject them to further tests in the lab. But the tests in the lab are basic. It's mostly for moisture, and then visual assessments to check if there's no mold, if there's no pests, like weevils and stuff. And then we also grade at the factory level, and then we then process into the oil. So that's the basic way of this checking. That we've got good quality raw material, but there's obviously other things that you cannot visually assess for, that you would only assess once the oil has been produced. So at our lab, we've also got a lab that will then check the quality of the oil for freshness, for contamination, and things like that. It's the basic requirement for a good quality oil, which is standard, whether you've got certifications or not. So that's what I've just explained. And then there's the additional requirements, which which relate to specific certifications. For example, organic. We are organically certified on most of our species, except for Kalahari melon. And so the organic standards, I think that's a universal kind of standard. So we are guided by the organic principles. So we train the farmers so that they understand what the industry requires for organically produced material. And then we are also Faywild certified for the baobab. We do apply Faywild principles across the entire range of products, even though our certification is only on the baobab. And so we also have to adhere to these kinds of certifications. We are also working towards the Union of Ethical Biotrade certification. So we are a member, and this certification sort of takes, borrows from both the organic and Faywild kind of principles. So it's not that hard to adhere to. So for all these different certifications, we ensure that the farmers that we work with are aware of, the standards and are aware of what is required by each of the certification. A lot of it is I think a lot of the requirements are really on us as the business, but we have to ensure that the farmers also understand what this certification means and what is required from them as the farmers. Usually their requirements are at a minimum. So we make sure that everybody across, the value chain understands. The standard that we've developed has been mostly from our own experiences over the years. And some of it has been borrowed from similar commodities or crops. For example, when you're talking about seeds, the moisture levels, I think that tends to be standard for a lot of seeds, whether it's cotton seed or maize seed and soybean, for a lot of grains, moisture levels tend to be the same. And also some of the visual inspections, they are standards that we've borrowed from. And then some stuff we've literally have developed from scratch, from having been experienced with these species over the years. For example, with the marula nut, it is not with the kernel that you get. It is not a whole kernel. Sometimes it's chipped and it's broken up. So there is no standard in the world for quality specifications for such a product. So you then have to tweak, the various standards that are available, and then also the experience that you've gained, and also what is possible at community level. Then you come up with something that is workable. We are at the mercy of the farmer, what the farmer can produce, and it varies from year to year. And there are a lot of factors that influence what the farmer can produce and what the farmer can access. The climate change, as we are experiencing in recent years, is a major factor. Interestingly, this year has been a year that has been different from other years. We've had a lot of rain in the region, which has affected, some of the fruiting in a positive way and some in a negative way. But also linked to that is the alternative activities that the farmers then engage in. So farmers, rural farmers, subsistence farmers by nature, they will prioritize their crops. So in a bad year, when their crop fails, they will focus, their attention will be shifted to other things that can earn them money. And that would include our products. In a year where there is a bumper harvest, they're going to be focusing more on their crops. So even if there's a lot of marula, you're definitely not going to get a lot of marula from them because they're busy with their maize, with the sunflower and whatever else they've grown. So we remain at their mercy, really. And also the value that they place on your product will determine how much time they're going to spend on it. If it earns them more money than the maize crop, they might just spend more time on it and give you the crop, the product. But if it earns them less, or if it requires too much time compared to anything else that they find lucrative, you struggle to get, the volumes. But generally, over the years, we have seen a steady increase in the volumes that the farmers would give us, and that has been mainly because of the income that the additional income that they get from our products. So a lot of our products are mainly harvested outside of the cropping seasons. And so this is the time when they don't have so much work in their fields. And also because our products do not require any investment in terms of resources or inputs, anyone can get involved. So you don't need to have seeds, you don't need to have fertilizer. So even the poorest of the poor can get involved. All they need to do is just go into the forest and harvest. So there are no barriers to entry for such a business. So we've seen that, when people have realized that there's a value in a product, they will focus more on it. So over the years, that's what has contributed to the growth. Sometimes we do see some contamination. A lot of the contamination really is usually what we call foreign matter or extraneous matter, which is mainly from either the surrounding or it's from the particular plant itself. So for example, with the melon, there may be pieces of the actual melon pulp in the melon seeds, or with the baobab, there may also be baobab shells or baobab leaves in the material. So if it is a contaminant of the same plant origin, we are not too worried about that. Other contaminants such as stones or animal dung or cow dung is definitely of concern to us, because then it contributes to some of the bacteria or the microbiology. And these are the things that we usually reject at the point of purchasing. So our products are not distilled. It's called extraction or just oil expelling. And most of the oils are extracted using a cold extraction technology, which uses the room temperature. So there's no need to control the temperature there. There's no heating at all. There are some seeds that are hard, like the baobab, and the type of expeller that we use will generate a bit of heat because of friction. The seed is hard, and when it's crushed against metal, there is a bit of heat. With that, we do check the temperature, and the temperature has to be below 50 degrees in order for it to qualify as cold extraction. We're just using a thermometer. So we are mainly using bulk storage containers, and bulk, when we dispense to the customers, is also in bulk. So it all depends on the volume that the customer wants to purchase. Normally, we store in the drums, in the steel drums. Those are 190 kgs or 210 liters. And then if customers want less than that quantity, we use the plastic containers, which are normally 20 kilos or 25 kilos. It's actually 23 kilos or 25 liters. So those are the options of packaging that we have. In terms of labeling, it's not that difficult, because it's mainly just labeling what the product is and assigning a batch number to the product, and some information on storage conditions, and also maybe the best before date. And it's generally a computer printed label. It's not a graphic designed kind of label. And it also depends on what the customer is asking for. Some customers have got their own labeling requirements, and also the certification systems that we use also require a certain standard in the information that you place on a label. So we combine the two, what the customer wants and also what the certification system requires. The phytosanitary certificates are not required. The phytosanitary certificates are required on plant raw materials. So if we were supplying seeds, for example, or leaves to a customer, then we would need to have a phytosanitary certificate.